Welcome to Once Upon English.
In the flickering light of cinema screens around the world, one name echoes across generations: Angelina Jolie. She is more than just a movie star, more than just a pretty face, more than the iconic roles she played. Her story is not merely about fame or the allure of Hollywood. It's a tale of transformation, of rebellion, of compassion, inner struggle, and relentless reinvention. Born into the golden spotlight, the daughter of one of America's most celebrated actors, she could have chosen the easy path, but she didn't. Her life, riddled with contradictions and raw emotion, became a labyrinth of artistic brilliance, deep personal battles, and unexpected awakenings. From the troubled teenager with a fascination for death, to the fearless actress who dared to bare her soul on screen. From the Hollywood icon who conquered the box office, to the globe-trotting humanitarian who walked through minefields in war-torn lands, Angelina Jolie redefined what it means to live purposefully in a world that often loses sight of meaning. This is not just the story of an actress. This is not just a tale of stardom. This is the epic journey of a woman who lived many lives within a single lifetime and dared to make each one count. Get ready for an extraordinary voyage across continents, film sets, hospitals, war zones, courtrooms, and the complex corridors of the human heart. This is the life of Angelina Jolie, raw, powerful, and unforgettable. The Birth of a Star in Shadows, 1975 to 1989. On June 4, 1975, in the heart of Los Angeles, California, a child was born into cinematic royalty. Her name, Angelina Jolie Voight. Her father, John Voight, was already a renowned actor, having won an Academy Award for his role in Coming Home. Her mother, Marceline Bertrand, had once been a budding actress herself, a woman of gentle grace and quiet resilience who gave up her career to raise her children. From the very beginning, Angelina's life was bathed in light, but cast in long shadows. Though she came into the world with Hollywood in her blood, the truth was more complicated. Her parents' marriage was deeply strained. John Voight, despite his charisma and fame, was unfaithful and emotionally distant. Just a year after Angelina's birth, Marceline left him, taking little Angelina and her older brother James Haven to start a new life, one without the glamour of red carpets. Angelina would later say that her mother was the most gentle, nurturing soul she had ever known. Marceline raised them in a modest, two-bedroom apartment in New York City, far removed from the glitter of Hollywood. She sacrificed everything to give her children a loving, stable home. But even in that warmth, there was always a sense of loss hovering in the air. The absence of a father, the fading dreams of a mother. Even as a child, Angelina was different. While other girls played with dolls, she was fascinated by the macabre. She collected knives, she read funeral poems. She would stare for hours at the sky, lost in thoughts too deep for someone her age. But she was also fiercely emotional, deeply empathetic, and incredibly imaginative, traits that would later make her a powerhouse on screen. At the age of 11, her family returned to Los Angeles. She enrolled in the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute, where she trained in method acting. But school was not kind to her. She was painfully thin, wore braces, and often dressed in dark clothes. Her classmates called her a freak. She was bullied, isolated, and even at one point dreamed of becoming a funeral director, fascinated by death and the ritual of mourning. Her self-esteem plummeted. She would later recall, "I didn't feel close to people. I always felt like an outsider. I didn't fit in." Angelina's early teen years were marked by a swirl of depression, self-harm, and identity confusion. She began cutting herself, not as a cry for attention, but as a way to feel something, anything. She started experimenting with drugs. By the age of 14, she was living with her boyfriend in her mother's home, dressed in black leather, dyeing her hair purple, and seemingly headed for a dark path. But inside her, a fire was building, a yearning for expression, for meaning, for a place where her chaos could become art. The 1990s arrived with a tremor in Angelina's world, the kind that shakes the walls of adolescence and demands transformation. By the time she turned 15, her gothic phase was fading, but her internal turbulence hadn't subsided. She still bore the scars of rejection, both from her father and society. But now, something had shifted. Angelina began to reclaim her identity. Through acting, she returned to the Lee Strasberg Institute with renewed intensity. Her emotions, once chaotic and misunderstood, now became powerful tools. The pain she carried, the wounds of abandonment, the rawness of her spirit, began to fuel her performances. She wasn't pretending on screen. She was bleeding truth. Her early work included small roles in student films, but Angelina knew she wasn't meant for mediocrity. She wanted to rip the screen open with honesty. And soon, she did. In 1993, she landed her first lead role in Cyborg 2, a low-budget science fiction film. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't a hit, but Angelina didn't care. It was a start. And it was on set that she realized the camera loved her. Not for her beauty, though she had it in spades, but for the fire behind her eyes. With her cropped hair, defiant attitude, and electric chemistry with co-star Johnny Lee Miller, Angelina didn't just act. She announced herself to the world. Critics were divided, audiences weren't sure what to make of her. But behind the scenes, she and Miller fell in love. Just a few months later, they were married, and she famously wore black leather pants and a white shirt, with his name written across it in her own blood. It was strange, intense, wild. It was pure Angelina. But Hackers, while a cult classic now, didn't catapult her to stardom. That came from the roles that allowed her to dig deeper into her soul. In 1997, she portrayed Cornelia Wallace in George Wallace, a powerful TV film. Her portrayal of the complex, emotionally torn First Lady won her a Golden Globe Award. It was the first time critics began to whisper, "This woman is not just a rebel. She's a real actress." But it was her performance as supermodel Gia Karangi in Gia, 1998, that shattered all doubt. Gia was raw, brutal, beautiful, and so was Angelina's performance. She embodied the tragic supermodel's spiral into addiction and death with such ferocity and heartbreak that audiences were left breathless. She didn't just play Gia, she became her. The transformation was so immersive that even the cast and crew had to remind themselves, this isn't Gia, this is Angelina. The role earned her a second Golden Globe and a Screen Actors Guild Award. But more than that, it cemented her identity in the public eye. Angelina. Jolie wasn't just Hollywood royalty. She was Hollywood's most dangerous and luminous talent. Yet, success didn't quiet her inner storms. Her marriage to Johnny Lee Miller fell apart. She described herself as restless, emotional, intense to live with. She adopted a pet snake, collected more knives, and though the world was watching, she still felt alone. She once said in an interview, "I was still the girl who felt like she didn't belong anywhere." But destiny had other plans. The universe was about to hand her a role that would turn her from an artist to a supernova. The 2000s were approaching, and with them would come Lara Croft, Oscar Gold, and a purpose far greater than fame. Stardom, scandal, and the rise of a global icon, 1999 to 2005. The world was changing, and so was she. By the dawn of 1999, Angelina Jolie had transformed from a tormented outsider into a breakout star, fierce, unpredictable, and captivating. But no one, not even Hollywood, was ready for the storm she was about to unleash. That year, she starred alongside Denzel Washington in The Bone Collector, holding her own next to the veteran actor. The film was a commercial success, but it was just a warm-up, because later that same year came a role that would define the first peak of her career. Girl interrupted. Starring as Lisa Rowe, a dangerously charismatic sociopath in a mental institution, Angelina didn't just play the role. She devoured it. Her energy was volcanic. Next to her, even Winona Ryder, the film's lead, seemed muted. Every scene Angelina appeared in burned with truth, pain, and an electrifying madness. And when award season arrived, it was clear who Hollywood had fallen in love with. Angelina Jolie won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. She was only 24. Standing on the Oscar stage, clutching the golden statue in her trembling hand, she thanked her family, especially her brother James, whom she kissed on the lips that night. Sparking tabloid frenzy. The media spun wild narratives. Was it incestuous? Was it a publicity stunt? But Angelina didn't care. She never played by the rules. And now the world was obsessed with her because of it. Then came Lara Croft. When she signed on to play the lead in Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, 2001, some scoffed. It was a video game movie after all. But Angelina saw something more. A bold, physical role, a global platform, and a chance to embody strength in a new way. To prepare, she trained in martial arts, learned dialects, performed stunts, and adopted a gritty English accent. The result? A global box office smash. Lara Croft didn't just cement Angelina as a worldwide action star, it also ignited something inside her. During filming in Cambodia, she was confronted with the extreme poverty and human suffering in the country. It deeply moved her, cracked open her heart, and planted the seeds of what would become her life's true mission. But more on that soon. First came more fame and scandal. In 2002, she shocked the world again, this time by adopting a child from Cambodia. She was only 26, single, and already controversial, but she didn't need approval. She named the boy Maddox, and with his arrival, her life changed. She called motherhood her first real reason to wake up in the morning. But as she tried to build a new identity as a mother, her personal life remained on fire. That same year, she married Billy Bob Thornton, a relationship that became legendary for its intensity. They wore vials of each other's blood around their necks, spoke in interviews about their crazy love, and sent the media into a frenzy. Yet within a year, it had crashed and burned, and she was alone again. But solitude had become her ally. Between movie sets and humanitarian trips to Africa, Cambodia, and Pakistan, she began to split her identity, actress by day, activist by night. In 2003, she reprised her Lara Croft role in The Cradle of Life, then starred in Taking Lives and Sky Captain and The World of Tomorrow, films that kept her name blazing in the box office, but couldn't contain the storm building inside her. And then, Mr. and Mrs. Smith happened. The year was 2004, and she was cast opposite Brad Pitt in what was supposed to be a slick action comedy about a married couple of secret assassins. The chemistry was immediate, dangerous, electric. Though both denied it at the time, rumors exploded that Angelina and Brad, then married to Jennifer Aniston, were falling in love on set. By the time Mr. and Mrs. Smith was released in 2005, the world was consumed with the scandal. Brad and Jennifer divorced. Angelina denied being the cause, but paparazzi chased her. Headlines screamed betrayal, and tabloid culture hit its fever pitch. Through it all, she remained calm, poised, focused, and she began to redefine herself once more, not just as an actress or a beauty icon or a scandal magnet, but as something far more powerful. A humanitarian, a mother, a warrior with a cause. Her life was about to transcend Hollywood entirely. The birth of Brangelina, Humanitarian Legacy, and Global Fame, 2005 to 2010. The flames of scandal had barely cooled when a new power couple rose from the ashes, Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. The world called them Brangelina, a fusion of names that signaled not just a romance, but a global phenomenon. When paparazzi snapped photos of them vacationing together in Kenya with Angelina's son Maddox, it was the confirmation the media had been salivating for. But beneath the headlines and speculation, something real was blooming, something intimate, complex, and transformative. Angelina didn't just find love. She found a partner who matched her ambition, her vision, and her global conscience. In 2005, after adopting Maddox in 2002, Angelina made a bold move. She adopted Zahara Marley, a 6-month-old Ethiopian girl abandoned due to illness. Just a year later, Brad Pitt legally adopted both Maddox and Zahara, officially becoming their father. It was a family by choice, by heart, by global connection, and it stunned the world. And then, in 2006, came Shiloh Nouvelle Jolie Pitt, the biological daughter of Angelina and Brad. The birth took place in Namibia, far from Hollywood, far from flashing cameras. Angelina had become a symbol of global motherhood, someone who lived outside the traditional rules of fame. Shiloh's baby pictures were sold to magazines for $10 million, the proceeds donated to charity. This wasn't just motherhood, it was activism through parenthood. Meanwhile, Angelina's star power only intensified. She starred in The Good Shepherd, 2006, and A Mighty Heart, 2007, where she portrayed Marianne Pearl, the real-life widow of slain journalist Daniel Pearl. The role was emotionally devastating, raw, personal, and deeply human. Critics praised her maturity and restraint. It was no longer about being the bad girl of Hollywood. It was about depth, empathy, and truth. But while her acting career flourished, her humanitarian work reached an entirely new dimension. As a UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador, Angelina traveled to war zones, refugee camps, and disaster areas. From Darfur to Iraq, Jordan to Cambodia, she didn't just visit. She listened, she advocated, and she acted. In 2007, she co-founded the Jolie Pitt Foundation with Brad, donating millions to global causes. From rebuilding homes in New Orleans post-Katrina to supporting education for girls in Afghanistan and clean water projects in Africa. She once said, "We cannot close our eyes to the needs of others," and she didn't. In 2008, their family grew again, this time in France, where Angelina gave birth to twins, Knox Léon and Vivienne Marceline. The arrival of twins marked a new era. Angelina, once the tattooed rebel child of Hollywood, was now a mother of 6, a global humanitarian, and one of the most powerful women in the entertainment industry. That same year, she delivered one of her most powerful performances in Clint Eastwood's Changeling, 2008. Playing Christine Collins, a mother whose child is kidnapped by the Los Angeles Police Department, only to have a different child returned to her. The emotional weight of the role mirrored her personal values: maternal devotion, the fight for justice, and courage in the face of corruption. Angelina was nominated for another Academy Award. By 2009, she and Brad had reached an almost mythical status. They were not just actors, they were architects of global culture, symbols of hope, and targets of endless fascination. Tabloids followed their every move, but Angelina remained focused on family, on films, and on her growing diplomatic presence. She became one of the few Hollywood stars invited to speak at the World Economic Forum and at congressional hearings in Washington. She met with presidents, ministers, and global leaders, speaking not as a celebrity, but as a witness, a voice for the voiceless. By the time the decade closed in 2010, Angelina Jolie had transcended fame. She was no longer just a movie star. She was a mother of 6, a UN diplomat, an Oscar-winning actress, a global activist, and one of the most admired and complex women on the planet. But the next chapter of her story would bring even greater challenges and choices that would redefine her legacy forever. War, womanhood, and radical reinvention, 2010 to 2015. The second decade of the 21st century brought with it a seismic shift in Angelina Jolie's identity. She had already defied expectations, shattered tabloid caricatures, and redefined what it meant to be a modern woman in Hollywood. But between 2010 and 2015, she would become something even greater, a director, a diplomatic force, a symbol of resilience, and a woman who would take the most personal pain and transform it into a powerful global statement. Angelina had always lived in front of the camera, but in 2011, she stepped behind it for the very first time. Her directorial debut in The Land of Blood and Honey was not a vanity project. It was a haunting, deeply political love story set during the Bosnian War of the 1990s, one of the most brutal conflicts in modern European history. The film focused on a romance between a Serbian soldier and a Bosnian Muslim woman during the siege of Sarajevo, tackling themes of power, trauma, and the weaponization of sexuality in war. Angelina wrote, directed, and produced the film herself. She cast local actors from the region, many of whom had lived through the war firsthand. She refused to water it down for Hollywood or gloss over the brutality. The result? A film that shocked, educated, and polarized audiences. Critics were stunned by its maturity, authenticity, and courage. She was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Foreign Language Film. Suddenly, Angelina Jolie was no longer just a participant in stories. She was crafting them, owning them, commanding them. In 2012, the UNHCR elevated her role from Goodwill Ambassador to Special Envoy, a rare title granted to only a few individuals in history. This wasn't symbolic. It meant real diplomatic power. She began traveling with UN High Commissioner Antonio Guterres to crisis zones: Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, South Sudan, Myanmar. She gave speeches at the UN Security Council, demanding accountability for sexual violence in conflict. She met with survivors of war, survivors of rape, survivors of genocide, not as a celebrity, but as a representative of global conscience. During one visit to a refugee camp, a young girl told her, "You are the only one who came. Everyone else forgot us." Those words never left her. In March 2013, Angelina made a move that would send shockwaves through the world. Not in film, not in politics, but in health. She published a personal op-ed in the New York Times titled "My Medical Choice." In it, she revealed that she carried the BRCA1 gene mutation, giving her an 87% risk of developing breast cancer and a 50% chance of ovarian cancer. Her mother, Marceline Bertrand, had died at just 56 from ovarian cancer. Angelina wasn't going to let history repeat itself. So, at age 37, she made the radical and deeply brave decision to undergo a preventive double mastectomy. The world gasped. A woman whose beauty had been the subject of global obsession, whose sensuality was iconic, chose to remove her breasts in the name of health, motherhood, and life. She didn't hide it. She didn't mask it. She spoke openly, candidly, and with absolute grace. Her decision was revolutionary. It changed the conversation around women's health globally. Thousands of women got tested. Countless lives were saved. Doctors and patients called it the Jolie effect. 2 years later, in 2015, she had her ovaries and fallopian tubes removed, further lowering her cancer risk. It triggered early menopause, but she stood by her decision. "I feel feminine," and grounded in the choices I am making for myself and my family, she wrote. Angelina Jolie was no longer defined by the body the world once idolized. She was defined by the mind, the spirit, and the courage that lay within. As if her health revelations weren't enough, Angelina simultaneously directed her second film, Unbroken, based on the incredible true story of Louis Zamperini, an Olympic athlete and World War II bombardier who survived 47 days adrift in the Pacific Ocean, only to be captured and tortured in Japanese POW camps. The film was a testament to the human spirit. Angelina poured her soul into it. She met Louis before his death. She listened to his stories. She cried when he spoke of forgiveness for those who had hurt him. Unbroken was massive. It grossed over $160 million, earned 3 Academy Award nominations, and proved Angelina Jolie could command blockbusters not just as a star, but as a visionary director. After nearly a decade together, Angelina and Brad finally married in a private ceremony at their French estate in Chateau Miraval. The ceremony was intimate. Their children wrote the vows. Angelina's dress was embroidered with their drawings. It wasn't Hollywood, it was home. For that moment, the world paused. Brangelina, once scandalous, now symbolized family, forgiveness, and forever. In 2015, Angelina and Brad starred together in By the Sea, a quiet, melancholic film about a married couple drifting apart during a vacation in France. Angelina wrote and directed it. It was personal, moody, and deeply symbolic. It was a story about pain and connection, love and grief. Many saw it as a metaphor for the complexity of their real-life marriage. Angelina later admitted, "We were dealing with some things. I wanted us to work through it together." The film wasn't a commercial success, but it was a creative exorcism, a kind of emotional archaeology. She was no longer playing characters. She was excavating herself. By the end of 2015, Angelina Jolie had redefined what it meant to be powerful, not just as an artist, not just as a woman, but as a human being. Her life had become a mosaic made of trauma and triumph, pain and poetry, tragedy and transformation. But the years ahead would test her in ways no one expected. Divorce, diplomacy, and the return of Maleficent, 2016 to 2020. By the time 2016 arrived, Angelina Jolie had become more than a celebrity. She was a global figurehead of transformation, an actress turned activist, a director of conscience, a mother of 6, and a woman who had faced loss, risk, war, and love with unflinching honesty. But fate, once again, was about to test her. And this time it would hit where it hurt most, at the heart of her family. The headlines came like a thunderclap. September 20th, 2016. Angelina Jolie files for divorce from Brad Pitt. No warning, no statement, just shockwaves. The couple who had once seemed unbreakable, who had traversed continents together, raised 6 children, made films, and stood hand in hand at refugee camps, had split. And this wasn't just a separation. It was a storm. Angelina cited irreconcilable differences. Rumors swirled about an incident on a private plane, about parenting, about disagreements in how to raise their children. The FBI and Child Services even launched an investigation, which eventually cleared Brad of wrongdoing. But the damage was done. For Angelina, this wasn't just a divorce. It was the shattering of a sacred space, the family she had so carefully built. In the public eye, she remained composed. But in private, she was devastated. She moved with the children into a new home in Los Angeles. The press followed every step, but she stayed silent out of respect for her children. Years later, she would say, "It was a very painful time. But I do it for the well-being of my family. That's my focus." After the divorce, Angelina poured herself even more deeply into motherhood. Her 6 children, Maddox, Pax, Zahara, Shiloh, Knox, and Vivian, were not just her companions. They were her everything. She homeschooled them, traveled with them, let them speak different languages at home: Khmer, French, Amharic, and more. She encouraged activism, art, and independence. Each child had their own voice, and Angelina amplified it rather than directing it. Maddox went off to college in South Korea. Zahara began working on humanitarian issues. Shiloh showed a passion for dance and art. The twins explored theater. Pax became interested in photography and music. Angelina wasn't trying to mold them into stars. She wanted to raise global citizens, individuals who understood the world, its beauty, and its sorrow. In 2019, she returned to the role that had redefined her in fantasy cinema: Maleficent. Maleficent. Mistress of Evil was a darker, richer, and more mature story. It wasn't just about curses and castles. It was about found family, forgiveness, female power, and identity. Angelina, dressed once again in black horns and red lipstick, played Maleficent not as a villain but as a mother, a warrior, and a misunderstood soul. It mirrored her own journey: misjudged, mischaracterized, but ultimately full of love. The film was a box office hit, grossing over $490 million worldwide. But more than that, it gave her a platform to speak to young women about self-worth and independence. At the London premiere, she said, "We all feel misunderstood at times. We all feel outside. But we are stronger than we think." Despite personal upheaval, Angelina never stepped away from her global work. She continued to advocate for refugee rights, especially as the Syrian crisis worsened and millions were displaced. She visited camps in Jordan, Iraq, and Bangladesh, highlighting the plight of Rohingya refugees. She also launched the Preventing Sexual Violence initiative with the UK government, continuing her fight against wartime rape. In 2017, she co-edited a special issue of Refugees magazine, and in 2019 she gave a keynote speech at the UN, urging world leaders to take real action. In her own words, "I do not believe that peace is something passive. Peace requires courage, hard choices, and persistent voices." During these years, Angelina also became a writer and educator. She wrote opinion pieces on women's rights, child protection, and foreign policy. She co-authored a book titled Know Your Rights and Claim Them, aimed at empowering young people to understand their human rights. She became a visiting professor at the London School of Economics, teaching a course on women, peace, and security. Her students were astonished. Here was a woman who had once ruled the red carpet, now guiding academic discussions on post-conflict reconstruction and legal frameworks for gender-based violence. Between 2016 and 2020, Angelina stepped away from the spotlight more than ever before. She only took a handful of roles. Her focus was crystal clear: her children, her health, her global mission. But she remained a symbol, not of glamour, but of evolution. She had begun as a wild child, an actress of fire and chaos. She transformed into a humanitarian, a mother, and a woman of extraordinary depth. Through heartbreak surgeries, adoption, politics, and films, she had always been moving forward, changing, shedding skins, becoming more of herself. By the time 2020 arrived, the world was on the cusp of another global crisis. And once again, Angelina Jolie would meet the moment. Pandemic, purpose, and a new chapter, 2020 to 2024. The world shifted in 2020. The streets of cities emptied, borders closed, families were confined to their homes, and millions around the globe faced uncertainty, fear, and grief. But as the COVID-19 pandemic brought Hollywood to a near standstill, Angelina Jolie didn't retreat. She stepped forward, once again transforming crisis into opportunity, pain into purpose. For Angelina, the pandemic wasn't just a public health emergency, it was a humanitarian catastrophe, especially for the world's most vulnerable populations. She donated over $1 million to No Kid Hungry, an organization feeding children who were losing access to meals due to school closures. She also gave large personal donations to UNHCR, Doctors Without Borders, and the International Rescue Committee, focusing on refugee aid, healthcare, and women's protection during lockdown. But beyond money, she raised awareness. In op-eds for Time magazine, where she served as a contributing editor, she wrote passionately about how lockdowns were intensifying domestic violence, straining mental health, and widening inequality for girls worldwide. The pandemic has exposed the cracks in our world. The question is whether we have the courage to fill them or the apathy to ignore them. While many stayed silent, she used her voice like a beacon, guiding the world's attention to the shadows often ignored. Behind the scenes, Angelina was navigating her own storm. Her divorce proceedings with Brad Pitt continued, longer, messier, and more exhausting than anyone expected. The legal battle centered around custody, with both parties seeking more time with the children. Details remained largely private, but it was clear. Angelina was fighting for her kids. She maintained a peaceful home, one filled with art, books, languages, music, and activism. The children were homeschooled during lockdown, and Angelina ensured that their lives were still full of creativity and connection. Her approach to parenting during the pandemic was tender and resilient. You can't prevent children from feeling fear or sadness, but you can help them navigate it with strength. She also gave rare glimpses into her daily life in interviews. She shared how Pax was learning Korean cuisine, how Vivian was volunteering with animal rescue, how Zahara was blossoming into a human rights advocate. Even amid personal turmoil, her family thrived because she gave them the space, love, and freedom to do so. In 2020, Angelina marked the 7th anniversary of her preventive double mastectomy. She wrote about it, not with sorrow, but with power. I made choices to increase my chances of being here to see my children grow up. And I have never regretted it. She became a champion of genetic testing and women's healthcare rights, continuing to speak about BRCA genes, cancer prevention, and the importance of proactive medical decisions, especially for women with limited access to healthcare. Her openness helped millions of women worldwide feel less afraid of their own health journeys. After years of directing and activism, Angelina made a high-profile return to acting in 2021, this time as a superhero. In Marvel's Eternals, she played Thena, a fierce yet fragile immortal warrior struggling with memory illness and inner demons. The role was complex, and Angelina brought to it a quiet vulnerability that deeply resonated. She trained in swordplay and stunts, but also used the film as a metaphor for her real-life fight, for control, for memory, for purpose. Eternals premiered during a difficult time for the world, but it was a reminder. Angelina Jolie still had stories to tell. She also starred in Those Who Wish Me Dead, 2021, a survival thriller where she played a smoke jumper haunted by trauma. Though it wasn't a major box office hit, critics praised her intensity and emotional depth. More than a comeback, this was a reinvention, choosing roles that reflected her own emotional terrain. In collaboration with Amnesty International and human rights lawyer Geraldine Van Buren, Angelina co-authored a book for teens titled Know Your Rights and Claim Them. The book was a call to action for youth empowerment, teaching young people about their legal rights, how to challenge injustice, and how to be agents of change. Children have rights, just like adults, but unless they know them, they can't defend them. It wasn't a bestseller by traditional standards, but in classrooms, legal workshops, and refugee shelters, it became a spark, a tool, a voice. As the world emerged from the darkest days of the pandemic, Angelina began expanding her creative universe in quieter, more profound ways. She delved into architecture and design, collaborating with artisans and architects to create sustainable clothing and furniture that supported displaced women and refugees. She also directed and produced several passion projects behind the scenes, films exploring trauma, identity, and social justice. At the same time, she began mentoring young artists and filmmakers, especially from marginalized communities. She created opportunities, offered support, funded projects without fanfare. Angelina Jolie was no longer just an artist. She was becoming a catalyst. In recent years, Angelina has returned to the public eye not with spectacle, but with substance. She's spoken out against violence in Sudan, persecution in Iran, conflict in Ukraine, and systemic racism in the U.S. She's walked with refugees in Yemen. She's sat with abused women in safe houses in Serbia. She's listened more than she's spoken, but when she speaks, the world listens. In 2022, she formally parted ways with the UNHCR after 20 years as its Goodwill Ambassador and Special Envoy. But it wasn't a retirement. I want to work more directly with refugees and local organizations. Less bureaucracy, more action. And action followed. She launched a new foundation focused on women in conflict zones, trauma recovery, and grassroots leadership. She traveled less as a diplomat and more as a sister, ally, mother, and mentor. And today, as of 2025, Angelina Jolie is 50 years old. Her children are growing into adults. Her work is deeper than red carpets. And her legacy is no longer just about movies or marriages. It is about transformation, from wild child to warrior, from tabloid scandal to humanitarian icon, from misunderstood outsider to one of the most respected figures of her generation. She continues to act, to write, to fight. She continues to believe in justice, beauty, healing, and love. She is still becoming, and the world watches, knowing that whatever chapter comes next, it will be unforgettable.